The Intergalactic Union's sleek spacecraft, the Varnock star, descended through Earth's atmosphere, its hull shimmering against the bright blue sky. Crowds gathered in awe at the landing site, a sprawling complex designed to host the historic event. Talyarha, the appointed diplomat of the Varnock species, stood poised at the entry hatch, her green-tinted skin and tall, slender frame a stark contrast to the humans waiting below. She took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for the task ahead. The Varnock had always regarded humans with skepticism. Stories of their warlike nature, environmental recklessness, and internal conflicts had painted a bleak picture in Talyarha's mind. She was determined to endure this mission with professional detachment, despite her personal reservations. As she stepped onto the platform, a wave of murmurs and whispers swept through the crowd. Talyarha's eyes scanned the sea of faces, noting their expressions of curiosity and trepidation. Standing at the forefront was Jonathan Miles, the human liaison. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp, intelligent gaze that met hers directly, betraying neither fear nor hostility. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Talyarha," Jonathan greeted her with a practiced smile, extending his hand in a gesture of goodwill. Talyarha hesitated for a split second before taking his hand, the warmth of his grip surprising her. "Thank you, Mr. Miles. It is an honor to be here," she replied, her voice steady and formal. The initial formalities behind them, Talyarha and Jonathan sat across from each other in the conference room of the newly established Intergalactic Embassy. The room was a blend of human and Varnock design, with sleek metallic surfaces interspersed with natural elements like plants and wood. "Let's get straight to the point," Jonathan began, leaning forward slightly. "The primary concern for humanity is the proposed trade routes through our solar system. We need guarantees that our interests will be protected." Talyarha raised an eyebrow. "The Varnock have always upheld fair trade practices. Your concerns about protection seem to imply distrust in our intentions." Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's not about distrust, Ambassador. It's about ensuring mutual benefit and security. Human history has taught us to be cautious." "Human history is indeed fraught with cautionary tales," Talyarha replied, her tone icy. "But the Varnock have no interest in repeating such mistakes. Our proposal includes stringent safeguards and mutual oversight." The exchange set the tone for their negotiations, sharp, pointed, and unyielding. Talyarha found herself both irritated and intrigued by Jonathan's directness. He challenged her assumptions at every turn, refusing to be intimidated by her diplomatic stature. As the discussions continued, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Jonathan presented data supporting humanity's need for secure trade routes, while Talyarha countered with Varnock principles of balance and fairness. Each argument built upon the last, creating a complex web of points and counterpoints. During a particularly heated debate, Jonathan's frustration broke through his professional veneer. "You speak of fairness, but what about the impact on our already strained resources? Your proposals don't account for the environmental toll." Talyarha's eyes flashed with annoyance. "The Varnock are deeply committed to environmental preservation. Perhaps if humans adopted more sustainable practices, these concerns would be less pressing." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Jonathan took a deep breath, visibly calming himself. "Let's not turn this into a blame game. We're here to find solutions, not to point fingers." Talyarha nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Agreed. Solutions should be our focus." Despite the friction, Talyarha couldn't ignore a growing respect for Jonathan's dedication to his people. His passion mirrored her own commitment to the Varnock, a realization that unsettled her. As they wrapped up the day's session, she found herself looking forward to their next encounter, despite the inevitable clash of wills. The convoy moved through the bustling streets of the city, flanked by security personnel, and marked by flags representing both Earth and Varnock. Talyarha sat in the back of an armored vehicle, reviewing notes for the next round of negotiations. Jonathan sat across from her, a tablet in his hands, but his eyes scanning their surroundings through the window. Suddenly, the serene procession was shattered by an explosion. The blast rocked the vehicle, shattering windows and throwing Talyarha against the door. Alarms blared, and the convoy came to an abrupt halt. "Get down," Jonathan shouted, pulling Talyara to the floor as gunfire erupted outside. Chaos ensued as the security detail scrambled to respond. The attackers, hidden in the buildings lining the street, rained bullets and energy blasts on the convoy. Jonathan grabbed a communication device, barking orders to the security team. "Stay close to me," he instructed Talyara, his voice steady despite the danger. Talyara, though shaken, nodded. They crawled to the vehicle's rear exit, using the armored body for cover. Jonathan peeked out, assessing the situation before signaling for them to move. "We need to get to the safe zone," he said. "Follow my lead." They darted from the vehicle, weaving through the chaos. Jonathan led Talyara down a narrow alleyway, moving quickly but cautiously. Behind them, the sounds of the battle continued, a stark reminder of the threat they faced. As they rounded a corner, 2 armed insurgents blocked their path. Jonathan reacted instantly, disarming one with a swift motion and incapacitating the other with a precise strike. Talyara watched in awe, her respect for his skills growing despite the perilous situation. They continued through the maze-like streets, Jonathan guiding them with an assuredness that suggested intimate knowledge of the city's layout. Eventually, they found temporary refuge in an abandoned building, its interior dark and dusty. "Who could be behind this attack?" Talyara asked, her voice a mix of anger and confusion. "Hard to say," Jonathan replied, checking his communicator. "There are many factions that would benefit from disrupting our talks." Talyara sighed, frustration evident in her features. "I thought we were making progress. This chaos only reinforces the worst perceptions of humans." Jonathan glanced at her, his expression serious. "Not all humans are like this, Talyara, and not all Varnock see us as potential allies. This attack is meant to drive a wedge between us." As night fell, Talyara and Jonathan remained hidden in the dilapidated building. The silence of the city was occasionally broken by distant sirens and the hum of searchlights sweeping the streets. They had managed to evade immediate danger, but their situation was far from secure. "How long do you think we can stay here?" Talyara asked, breaking the silence. "Not long," Jonathan replied. "We need to find a safer place to regroup, but for now, we rest and plan." They found some tattered blankets and settled down in a corner. Despite the day's events, Talyara couldn't help but feel a grudging admiration for Jonathan's resilience. His calm under pressure was unlike anything she'd experienced. "Why do you care so much about these negotiations?" Talyara asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Jonathan leaned back, his eyes thoughtful. "Because I've seen what war can do. I've lost friends and family. This alliance, it's a chance to build something better, to prevent future conflicts." Talyara nodded, understanding more than she expected. "In Varnock society, we value harmony above all. It's why we initially kept our distance from humans. Your history, it frightened us." Jonathan gave a small, rueful smile. "Our history frightens us too sometimes. But we're trying to change, to be better." As they talked, the initial barriers between them began to crumble. Jonathan's candidness was disarming, and Talyara found herself sharing stories of her home, the Varnock's bioluminescent forests, and their deep connection to nature. Suddenly, a noise from outside broke their moment of camaraderie. Jonathan motioned for silence, creeping towards the boarded-up window to peer outside. A group of insurgents was sweeping the area, their searchlights probing every shadow. "We need to move now," Jonathan whispered urgently. They slipped out through a back door, moving quickly and quietly through the narrow alleys. Jonathan led them to an underground tunnel, hidden beneath an old maintenance hatch. "This should take us closer to the embassy," Jonathan explained, as they descended into the dimly lit passage. The tunnel was cold and damp, but it provided cover. As they navigated the labyrinthine path, Talyara couldn't shake the feeling that her perception of humans was shifting. Jonathan was not the ruthless, uncaring figure she had imagined. He was brave, thoughtful, and driven by a genuine desire for peace. Emerging from the tunnel, they found themselves in a quiet, deserted street. The embassy was still a few blocks away, but the immediate danger had lessened. "Almost there," Jonathan said, offering a reassuring smile. Talyara felt a strange sense of relief. Despite the ordeal, she no longer saw Jonathan as just a human liaison, but as a partner in their shared mission, and perhaps, just perhaps, as something more. Hiding in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse, the air was thick with tension and the lingering scent of burnt metal. Talia Ra and Jonathan, still on high alert from their escape, found a momentary respite behind a stack of old crates. Jonathan rummaged through his backpack, pulling out a small first aid kit. "Let me take a look at that cut," he said, gesturing to a gash on Talia Ra's arm. "It's nothing," she replied, her voice edged with stubbornness. "Humor me," Jonathan insisted, his eyes gentle but firm. Reluctantly, Talia Ra extended her arm. As Jonathan cleaned and bandaged the wound, she observed his careful, deliberate movements. His hands, calloused from years of service, were surprisingly gentle. "Why did you join the military?" Talia Ra asked, breaking the silence. Jonathan paused, considering the question. "I grew up in a rough neighborhood. The military was a way out, a way to make something of myself. But more than that, it gave me a purpose, a chance to protect and serve." Talia Ra nodded, absorbing his words. "In Varnock society, we are taught from a young age the importance of harmony and balance. My path to becoming a diplomat was a natural one, shaped by our values." Jonathan finished bandaging her arm and sat back, his expression thoughtful. "Your world sounds peaceful." "It is," Talia Ra said, her voice softening. "Our forests glow with bioluminescent plants, and our cities blend seamlessly with nature. Conflict is rare, and when it arises, we resolve it through dialogue and understanding." Jonathan smiled. "Sounds like paradise." A comfortable silence settled between them. Talia Ra found herself drawn to Jonathan's openness. He was different from the humans she had imagined. He was kind, brave, and curious about her world. "I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this," Talia Ra admitted. "Relying on a human, feeling connected." Jonathan met her gaze, his eyes serious. "Maybe this mission was meant to show us both that our worlds aren't so different after all." As dawn broke, the city began to stir. Talia Ra and Jonathan prepared to leave their temporary refuge, their immediate danger seemingly behind them. They had a plan to reach the embassy, but fate had other ideas. Stepping out into the alley, they were met with an eerie silence. The streets were deserted, the usual hustle and bustle conspicuously absent. Jonathan's instincts tingled with unease. "Stay close," he whispered to Talia Ra, scanning their surroundings. They moved cautiously, every sense heightened. Just as they reached the main road, the ambush sprang. Insurgents emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on the pair. A barrage of gunfire erupted, forcing them to dive for cover behind a parked vehicle. "We need to find a way out," Talia Ra shouted over the noise, her heart pounding. Jonathan assessed their situation, his mind racing. "We need to split up. It'll confuse them, give us a better chance." Talia Ra hesitated, but nodded. "Where will we meet?" "Head to the old railway station," Jonathan instructed. "I'll find you there." With a final nod, they broke cover, moving in opposite directions. The insurgents were momentarily thrown off. Their attention divided. Jonathan fired back, providing cover for Talia Ra as she sprinted down a side street. Dodging through narrow alleys and over fences, Talia Ra's mind raced. She'd never experienced anything like this, and yet she felt a strange exhilaration. Her respect for Jonathan's quick thinking grew with every step. Meanwhile, Jonathan engaged the insurgents, using his knowledge of the city to his advantage. He led them on a chase through back alleys and abandoned buildings, gradually thinning their numbers with precise shots. As Talia Ra neared the railway station, she spotted movement ahead. Her heart sank as more insurgents appeared, blocking her path. She ducked into a nearby building, finding herself in a small, dimly lit room. Moments later, Jonathan burst in, breathless but unscathed. "I saw them. We need another plan." "There's a service tunnel under the station," Talia Ra said, recalling a map she had studied. "It might lead us to safety." They navigated through the building and found the entrance to the tunnel. It was dark and narrow, but it offered a chance to escape the immediate threat. As they moved through the damp, echoing corridor, Talia Ra felt a renewed sense of hope. Emerging on the other side, they found themselves in a quiet, overgrown park. The insurgents had lost their trail. They took a moment to catch their breath, the morning sun filtering through the trees. Jonathan turned to Talyara, a smile breaking through his exhaustion. "I think we make a pretty good team." Talyara returned the smile, her fear melting away. "I couldn't have done this without you." They continued toward the embassy, their bond stronger than ever. The danger had brought them closer, revealing strengths and vulnerabilities that transcended their differences. As they walked, Talyara couldn't help but feel that their partnership was only beginning. Inside the Varnock embassy, the stark contrast between the chaos they had escaped and the calm, controlled environment was almost jarring. Talyara and Jonathan were ushered into a secure conference room, the doors closing behind them with a quiet hiss. The silence was thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Talyara took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the table between them. "Jonathan, we need to talk about what happened." Jonathan nodded, his face a mix of determination and trepidation. "I know, and there's something I need to say, Talyara." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "What is it?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through," Jonathan began, his voice steady but soft. "And I can't deny what I feel. I care about you, Talyara, more than I ever thought possible." Talyara's heart raced, a mix of fear and hope swirling within her. "Jonathan, this is unprecedented. Our worlds, our duties, they're so different." "I understand that," Jonathan said, his eyes earnest. "But I can't ignore my feelings, can you?" Talyara felt her defenses crumbling. "I don't know. This mission has challenged everything I believed about humans. You've shown me a side of your species I never expected." Jonathan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I believe we can make this work, Talyara, but we have to be honest with ourselves and each other." The room fell silent as they held each other's gaze. Finally, Talyara nodded. "You're right, we have to be honest. And the truth is, I've come to care about you too, Jonathan." Their moment was interrupted by a soft chime from Talyara's communicator. She glanced at it, her expression turning serious. "The council has summoned me. I have to go." Jonathan squeezed her hand. "I'll be here when you get back." Talyara stood, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Jonathan, for everything." Talyara walked through the imposing corridors of the Varnock embassy, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming meeting. The council's chamber was grand and austere, filled with the most influential figures of her species. As she entered, she felt the weight of their gazes upon her. "Ambassador Talyara, please step forward," Elder Varnock, the head of the council, instructed. Talyara obeyed, her posture straight and dignified. "Honorable elders, I stand before you to report on my mission and the recent events." Elder Varnock's eyes were piercing. "We are aware of the attack on your convoy. We need to understand your perspective on the humans involved and the implications for our future relations." Talyara took a deep breath. "The attack was orchestrated by a faction that seeks to disrupt our negotiations. However, it does not represent the human race as a whole. Throughout this ordeal, I have witnessed humanity's resilience, bravery, and potential for good." Elder Saran, known for her skeptical stance, leaned forward. "You speak highly of them, Ambassador. Is there a particular reason for this change in perspective?" Talyara hesitated, then decided to speak her truth. "Yes, there is. Jonathan Miles, the human liaison, has been instrumental in protecting me and aiding our mission. He embodies the best qualities of his species: courage, compassion, and a genuine desire for peace." The council members exchanged glances, murmurs of surprise and contemplation filling the room. Elder Varnock raised a hand for silence. "This Jonathan Miles, you believe he represents a path forward for our relations with humans?" "I do," Talyara replied firmly. "Our experiences together have shown me that despite our differences, we can find common ground. An alliance with humanity, though challenging, could be immensely beneficial for both our species." Elder Saran's eyes narrowed. "And what of your personal feelings, Ambassador? Have they influenced your judgment?" Talyara felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks but stood her ground. "My personal feelings have opened my eyes to the potential of our alliance. I am committed to my duty, and believe that fostering a deeper understanding between our species is the right path. Elder Varnak nodded slowly. Your testimony is compelling, Talyarha. We will take your insights into consideration. For now, you are relieved of your duties while we deliberate. Talyarha bowed. Thank you, elders. Leaving the chamber, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had spoken her truth, but the council's decision was still uncertain. As she returned to the conference room where Jonathan awaited, her mind was filled with possibilities and fears. Jonathan stood as she entered, his concern evident. How did it go? Talyarha gave a small, weary smile. I've presented our case. Now we wait. Jonathan took her hand, his grip warm and reassuring. Whatever happens, Talyarha, we face it together. She nodded, feeling a sense of peace despite the uncertainty. Their journey was far from over, but together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days following her meeting with the council, Talyarha and Jonathan spent their time in the embassy, awaiting the council's decision. The tension was palpable, but their bond grew stronger. During one of their many conversations, Jonathan's face suddenly lit up with an idea. Talyarha, I think I know how we can turn the tide in our favor, Jonathan said, his eyes gleaming with determination. What do you have in mind? Talyarha asked, intrigued by his sudden burst of energy. Jonathan pulled up a holographic map of the city and pointed to a secure Union facility. I've been thinking about that attack. There's something bigger at play here, and I believe this facility holds the answers we need. If we can infiltrate it and find evidence of a conspiracy, we could expose those trying to sabotage the peace efforts. Talyarha frowned, her mind racing. That's incredibly risky. If we get caught, it could jeopardize everything. I know, Jonathan replied, his expression serious. But if we succeed, we could not only save our mission, but also pave the way for genuine peace. We need to act now before the council makes their final decision. Talyarha considered his words, weighing the risks and the potential rewards. Finally, she nodded. All right, let's do it. But we need a solid plan. They spent the next several hours strategizing. Using Jonathan's knowledge of human security protocols and Talyarha's technological expertise, they devised a plan to infiltrate the facility under the cover of night. As the city slept, Talyarha and Jonathan made their way to the outskirts where the Union facility stood, an imposing structure surrounded by high fences and security patrols. Dressed in dark, inconspicuous clothing, they approached the perimeter. Jonathan pulled out a small device and hacked into the security system, creating a temporary blind spot in the surveillance cameras. We have a 5-minute window to get inside, he whispered. They slipped through the fence and moved swiftly towards the building. Avoiding the patrols, they reached a side entrance. Jonathan disabled the lock and they slipped inside, the door closing silently behind them. The interior was dimly lit, the sterile corridors echoing their footsteps. Talyarha consulted the facility's layout on her tablet. The main data server is 3 floors down. That's where we need to go. Navigating the maze of hallways, they finally reached the server room. Jonathan worked quickly to bypass the security system, and they entered the room filled with humming machinery and blinking lights. Talyarha connected her device to the main terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. I'm accessing the encrypted files. This might take a few minutes. Jonathan kept watch, his eyes scanning the hallway outside. Hurry, Talyarha, we don't have much time. Moments later, Talyarha's screen flashed with success. Got it. These files contain detailed plans of the conspiracy. It's all here. Names, dates, strategies. This will expose everything. Just as they were about to leave, the alarm sounded, and red lights began to flash. We've been detected, Jonathan exclaimed. We need to get out of here, now. They sprinted through the corridors, their hearts pounding. Security forces closed in, and they had to duck into side rooms and use alternate routes to avoid capture. As they neared the exit, a group of armed guards blocked their path. Jonathan took a deep breath, readying himself for a fight. Stay behind me, he instructed. But Talyarha had other ideas. Using a small device, she created an energy shield that deflected the guards' attacks long enough for them to escape through a service hatch. Outside, they ran towards the perimeter fence. Jonathan reactivated the blind spot in the cameras, and they slipped through just as the alarms intensified. They didn't stop running until they were safely back in the city, hidden in the shadows of an alleyway. Catching their breath, Talyara held up the data drive triumphantly. "We did it, Jonathan. We have the evidence." Jonathan smiled, relief and pride shining in his eyes. "Let's get this to the council. This is our chance to make things right." They returned to the embassy, their hearts still racing from the adrenaline of their daring mission. Talyara immediately contacted the council, requesting an urgent meeting to present their findings. As they waited for the council to convene, Talyara turned to Jonathan. "Whatever happens next, I'm glad we did this together." Jonathan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "So am I, Talyara. So am I." Talyara and Jonathan stood before the Varnock Council once again, the evidence they had gathered securely stored on a data drive. The grand chamber was filled with the same influential figures, their expressions a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Talyara felt a surge of determination as she prepared to present their findings. "Honorable elders," she began, her voice clear and confident, "we have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy within the Intergalactic Union, aimed at undermining our peace efforts with humanity." She activated the holographic projector, displaying the encrypted files they had retrieved. Detailed plans, communication logs, and strategic documents filled the air, painting a damning picture of the conspirators' intentions. Elder Varnock leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he examined the evidence. "This is troubling. Who are the individuals behind this plot?" Talyara highlighted several names, prominent figures within the Union. "These individuals have been orchestrating attacks and spreading misinformation to drive a wedge between our species. Their goal is to disrupt the peace process and seize power." The council members murmured among themselves, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Elder Saran, usually skeptical, looked genuinely shocked. "This is unprecedented. We must act swiftly to address this threat." Jonathan stepped forward, his voice steady. "We believe that by exposing these conspirators and bringing them to justice, we can salvage the peace efforts and build a stronger alliance based on trust and mutual respect." Elder Varnock nodded slowly. "Your bravery and diligence have brought this conspiracy to light. We will take immediate action to apprehend these individuals and restore integrity to our negotiations." As the council members discussed the next steps, Talyara felt a sense of relief wash over her. They had succeeded in their mission, but the journey was far from over. The real work of building trust and cooperation between their species was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The Varnock Council, in collaboration with human authorities, launched a coordinated effort to apprehend the conspirators. Arrests were made, and the news spread quickly, shocking both Varnock and human societies. Talyara and Jonathan watched the events unfold from the embassy, their bond stronger than ever. The successful exposure of the conspiracy had not only vindicated their efforts but also laid the foundation for a renewed push towards peace. One evening, as they walked through the embassy gardens, Jonathan turned to Talyara with a thoughtful expression. "We did it, Talyara. We really did it." She smiled, the tension of the past weeks finally lifting. "Yes, we did, and it wouldn't have been possible without you, Jonathan." He took her hand, his eyes reflecting a mix of pride and affection. "I couldn't have asked for a better partner." As they continued their walk, a message came through on Talyara's communicator. It was a summons from Elder Varnock, requesting their presence in the council chamber. They exchanged a determined look and headed inside. In the chamber, the atmosphere was markedly different from their previous meetings. There was a sense of optimism and renewed purpose. Elder Varnock greeted them with a rare smile. "Ambassador Talyara, Mr. Miles, your efforts have not gone unnoticed. The Council has decided to move forward with the peace negotiations, incorporating the safeguards and mutual oversight you both championed." Talyara felt a surge of hope. "That is wonderful news, Elder Varnock. We are ready to assist in any way we can." Jonathan nodded in agreement. "We believe that with transparency and cooperation, we can build a lasting alliance." Elder Varnock gestured for them to take a seat. Your insights will be invaluable in the upcoming negotiations. We have also decided to recognize your unique partnership as a symbol of what we can achieve together." As they sat down, Talyara couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had overcome incredible odds and brought their species closer together. But most importantly, they had found something special in each other. After the meeting, they stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights of the embassy and the city beyond twinkled like stars, a testament to the possibilities of their combined efforts. Jonathan turned to Talyara, his voice filled with emotion. "No matter what the future holds, I'm glad I met you, Talyara." She looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I'm grateful for you, Jonathan. Together we've proven that we can overcome any obstacle." They stood there hand in hand, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their journey had been one of trials and triumphs, but together they knew they could build a future where their species could thrive in harmony. With the immediate threat of the conspiracy neutralized, the focus shifted back to the larger goal of solidifying peace between the Varnock and humans. As Talyara and Jonathan continued their collaborative efforts, their relationship deepened, both personally and professionally. However, the reality of their responsibilities loomed over them. One evening, they sat in the embassy garden, the bioluminescent plants casting a gentle glow around them. The air was filled with the scent of exotic Varnock flora, creating a serene atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the turmoil they had faced. "Talyara," Jonathan began, his voice tinged with hesitation. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us." She looked at him, her expression softening. "I have too, Jonathan. Our mission has brought us closer, but it has also highlighted the differences in our worlds and our duties." Jonathan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I love working with you, Talyara, and I care about you deeply. But I know you have obligations to your people, just as I have mine." Talyara reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Our bond is unique, and it's something I cherish. But we need to consider what's best for our respective species. The path ahead won't be easy." They sat in contemplative silence, the gravity of their situation sinking in. They both knew that the decisions they made now would have far-reaching implications, not just for them, but for the future of Varnock-human relations. "We've already achieved so much together," Jonathan said, breaking the silence. "Maybe it's time to trust in what we've built and let that guide our next steps." Talyara nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right. Whatever comes next, we must ensure that the foundation we've laid continues to grow, even if it means making personal sacrifices." The day of Talyara's departure arrived with a bittersweet air. The Varnock starship was ready to take her back to her home planet, where her insights and experiences would be invaluable in shaping future policies. The embassy staff and various dignitaries gathered to bid her farewell, recognizing her efforts in bridging the gap between their species. Jonathan stood by her side, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. "I can't believe this is goodbye," he said quietly. Talyara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the same mix of emotions. "It's not goodbye, Jonathan. It's more like, see you soon. We have too much work left unfinished to think of this as the end." They embraced, holding on to each other as if to imprint the memory of this moment. "Stay safe, Talyara," Jonathan whispered. "And remember, no matter where you are, we're in this together." "I will, Jonathan," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "And I'll be back, count on it." As Talyara boarded the starship, she took one last look at Jonathan, her heart heavy but hopeful. The doors closed, and the ship began its ascent, leaving Earth behind but carrying the promise of a return. Back on Varnock, Talyara was welcomed as a hero. Her reports and the evidence of the conspiracy were instrumental in reshaping Varnock's approach to interspecies relations. She shared her experiences and advocated for continued cooperation with humanity, emphasizing the potential for mutual growth and understanding. Months passed, and the initial sense of loss began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Talyara threw herself into her work, her thoughts often drifting back to the human who had shown her a different perspective on life and duty. Then, one day, a message arrived from Earth. It was an invitation to a summit on Varnock, aimed at furthering the peace talks and exploring joint ventures in technology and culture. The message was signed by Jonathan Miles. Taliara's heart soared as she read the invitation. She immediately responded, confirming her attendance and expressing her eagerness to continue their work together. When Jonathan arrived on Varnock, the reunion was everything they had hoped for. They walked through the glowing forests of Taliara's homeworld, discussing their plans and dreams. The challenges ahead were still daunting, but their resolve was stronger than ever. "Welcome to Varnock, Jonathan," Taliara said, smiling as they stood under the bioluminescent canopy. "It's beautiful," Jonathan replied, awe in his voice. "Just like you described." Taliara took his hand, her eyes shining with happiness. "Together we can build something amazing, Jonathan, for both our worlds." "And for us," Jonathan added, squeezing her hand gently. As they stood there, surrounded by the natural beauty of Varnock, they knew that their journey was far from over. The future was uncertain, but with their combined strength and dedication, they were ready to face whatever came next. Together.